Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Turn Up the Love Live. We are back with our third episode of this series. We've been talking all about how to stay mindful over the holidays. And if you're new to hanging out with me, I'm Sarah Pettis. I am a body positive, intuitive eating coach and the founder of turnupthelove.ca. And I help serial dieters to end the obsessive calorie counting, the endless binging and restriction, and all of that self-critical body shaming by helping them to ditch the diet culture and help them reconnect with food and their bodies. And today we're going to be talking about something that really helped me on my journey to healing my relationship with food. And since the holidays are just around the corner and Christmas is like less than a week away, can you believe it? I do not know where the time's gone this December, but I feel like that happens every year. So since it's less than a week away, I thought it would be a really great time to talk about how you can work on eliminating holiday overwhelm by practicing mindfulness instead. Because let's be honest, the holidays are a blast, but they can really put a high demand of expectations on us and a lot of pressure for us to feel really burnt out by the end of it, right? And when our emotions are really depleted, this often is a time that we turn to food to self-soothe or to fill ourselves back up from all the depletion, right? So that's why this week we're going to be talking all about how to actually use active listening to take the attention off the food this holiday. And active listening is actually a great practice to use to help you get more mindful. It's a really, really great place to get started if you're wanting to be more mindful in your conversation with others. Okay, so we're also going to be breaking down today what active listening is and what it actually has to do with your relationship with food. Okay, we're also going to be talking about how active listening will help you to handle difficulties in conversations when you're with friends and family members this holiday, especially if they're people who tend to dump all of their life problems on you. Yeah, it definitely happens. It definitely happens. And then what I want, my goal is to have you leave with super specific techniques and questions that you can use to start practicing active listening right away, because I really want you to be able to use this going into this holiday season. Okay? So for anyone that is joining me live, why don't you pop on in the comments and let me know that you're here. Say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I would love to see where all of you are from. And then I'd also like to hear from you. I want to know if during the holidays, do you find that you get sucked into hearing certain family members or friends vent about all of the things, and then you're left feeling emotionally drained, exhausted, burnt out by the end of the conversation? Do you have people in your life that tend to do that to you? Good morning, Dawn. Thank you so much for joining. It's so good to see you here. I cannot wait for our chat later this week. It's going to be really great. So yeah, do you have people like that in your life? Let me know in the comments section below if you do have certain family member or friends or just people in your social circle that tend to vent to you constantly. And then when you're done having these conversations with them, you're left feeling emotionally drained or burnt out. Let me know. If you are having these conversations, this is the perfect topic for you because, like I said, we're going to be chatting about active listening. We're also going to be chatting about what these kinds of conversations and how you handle them ends up having you turn to food and why that is and what this sort of practice is and why this happens, okay? And also, if you are going into the holidays, maybe you're wanting to connect more deeply with certain people you care about over the holidays. I mean, I know for me, my family lives out of town, so when I do visit them, I really like to connect on a deep level with them. So maybe that's something you're wanting to have this holiday season also. And if that's the case, then this will also be a really good topic for you. So again, hit me up in the comments and let me know what your relationships have looked like during the holiday season and what you envision them to look like this year. So for me, I tend to be the caretaker in my family. And lots of family members have mentioned that they feel really comfortable when they talk to me or share their problems with me. I kind of hold space for them in that way, right? And my family also knows that I'm a coach. So I feel like they tend to take advantage of that, and they're constantly seeking guidance about all the different areas of their life, especially as it relates to food, right? So it can be challenging for me at times because that's how people have positioned me as this go-to person, okay? And I also, like I said, I don't see my family very often because I do live out of town. So when I do, I find that they really like to catch me up to speed on all of the details that's going on in their world, right? Which can be kind of overwhelming, especially for someone like me who's an empath, right? So it can be extremely tough. It can be extremely tough, going into the holiday season and knowing that I'm going to be having all these types of conversations, right? And in the past, when I struggled with my relationship with food, really all of this emotional dumping really led me to turn to food as a means of reconnecting or soothing or just managing all the emotions that I was feeling, right? Food was sort of my go-to. It was my safety net. It's what often would make me feel better in that instant, even though it really wasn't getting to the root of the problem, right? And as I've come to realize as an empath, I've noticed that the holidays were typically a time where I was left feeling emotionally drained. So I knew that that was something that I had to prepare myself for so that I wouldn't be turning to the food in order to self-soothe and cave into that, right? So has this ever happened to anyone else? Have you ever felt this way based on the relationships in your life? If so, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being all the time, all my relationships are like this, I'm always feeling this way, and 1 being, no, never, I'm good, I'm groovy in my relationships, let me know what you're experiencing. Scale of 1 to 10. Drop them in the comments below. And again, if you have been experiencing this, you're totally in the right place because that's definitely what we're going to be talking about today. Okay? So I will say this before we get started. I will say this. This feeling is extremely common for disconnected eaters. Okay? It's extremely common for disconnected eaters. And I'm going to explain why in just a second. Before I explain why, I just want to recap what we're going to be chatting about today. So we're going to be talking about what is active listening and what it has to do with your relationship with food. Okay, I'm going to explain that for you. I'm also going to get into how active listening is going to help you to handle the difficult friends and family members this holiday who tend to dump all of their problems on you and leave you feeling overwhelmed and emotionally distraught. Okay? And then by the end of this, stay to the end because I'm going to be having you leave with super specific techniques and questions that you can use to start practicing active listening right away. Okay? So who's ready? Who's ready to get into this? Hit me up with an emoji, like a hands up emoji or a hell yeah. Hit me up with a hell yeah as well, because we've got lots to cover. So why don't we start off, get this conversation moving and grooving, by talking about what active listening is and what exactly this even has to do with your relationship with food. Because I'm sure you're wondering, like, why are you talking about active listening of all things, right? So in keeping with the theme of staying mindful over the holidays, active listening is a really great way to get you back into your body and to kind of put up a protective shield around others when you're in a conversation with them. Okay, so have you ever turned to food after an emotional conflict like I did, like I shared earlier? Or have you heard bad news from a loved one or a friend that left you to turn to food? Or after hearing some unfortunate news from someone you cared about, how did you cope? What was it that you turned to? For me, it was food. For me, it was definitely food. But I want to know how you sort of react when hearing some really unfortunate news or something that might be heavy from someone that you love. Okay? So like I shared, in my relationships, I tended to be that go-to person for all my friends and family when they had a problem. I was like their support system, their cheerleader. They knew that they could come to me for that level of care, right? And oftentimes that emotional buildup would lead me to needing to fill myself back up again with food, right? And usually this was pleasurable foods, often things like breads or muffins or bagels or chocolate, right? The really like pleasurable stuff that I loved. And during that time, you know, when I was turning to food, I didn't realize really what was happening. But what it was almost like my inner self, my inner little girl almost, I'm going to say, she was kind of acting out. You know, she was just kind of like, oh my God, like you're taking on all this stuff from other people, but what about me? What about me? When are you going to take care of me, Sarah? She was having like this temper tantrum within me, right? Because I was always thinking about others and I was never thinking about myself, right? So I was really craving this sort of pleasure or care of any kind, and that's really where the food would get loud, is when I neglected my own needs and only was thinking about the needs of others. Okay? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So Dawn has left a comment here. What is Dawn saying? Miss Dawn. Dawn has said yes. She has eaten sugary treats for emotional upsets. Yeah, it tends to be the really pleasurable food, the foods that give you that joy, that comfort, I find. And often it's because that inner little girl throws that temper tantrum within you and is just like, hey, what about me? Give me something too, right? She wants to be heard, so she's coming up, right? So that tends to be what happens, right? And the reason why active listening is so incredibly important when it comes to healing your relationship with food is because most disconnected eating, so feeling disconnected eating, what do I mean by that? I mean by people who tend to binge and restrict with foods, are always following a rigid meal plan, feeling out of control around food, feeling imprisoned by food, not knowing what to eat, when to eat, and how much. Right? So most of the disconnected eating, that comes from wanting to please others and doing for others and caring for others and worrying about others before thinking of yourself. Okay? And when you're always putting others' needs before your own, there's going to be repercussions. Okay? There's absolutely going to be repercussions. And the best way to put it is, the best example I can think of is like, you know, when you're flying, anyone here who's flown on a plane, what do the flight attendants always say? They always say, If an emergency were to happen, be sure to put your own oxygen mask on first before helping the person beside you, right? Because you have to take care of you first before you can help them. And the same goes in this situation. So if you're always doing for others, you're not actually doing for you, and that's going to leave you to feel emotionally depleted when that's where the food is going to get loud, right? And this also goes back to a couple of weeks ago, during week 1 of these chats we've been having about mindfulness over the holidays. We talked about how to balance the shoulds of the holiday season with your own needs. And that might be a really good topic to go back and re-listen to, just to kind of remind you of the importance of caring for yourself this holiday, okay? But basically what has happened is when you're taking on everyone else's problems, the body and the mind, they begin to look for that self-nurturing. And somewhere that's outside of themselves, if it's not coming from the source, okay? So if you are not giving that attention within, it's going to be an outside thing that you're going to seek that care and self-nurturing from, okay? Does that make sense? Let me know if this is making sense or not, if you have any questions about any of this so far before I continue, okay? Because when you're constantly giving your energy and your attention outside of yourself, your deepest inner self will act up. She is going to throw that temper tantrum, right? And this is why it is so incredibly important to use a technique like active listening in social situations, okay? And the reason why is active listening, what it actually does, for those of you who aren't aware of what active listening is, active listening really allows that other person that you're in a conversation with to problem solve on their own versus you coming up with all of the answers. So really when you're in a conversation with them, you're mostly just listening and being engaged and hearing what they're saying, and I'll give you more specifics of how to do that. But really, you're doing most of the listening and they're doing most of the talking. So it's almost like they're talking things out loud and they're coming up with their own solutions without you needing to be this massive problem solver. Okay? So really, it's just you holding space for them. Okay? So I just had a couple comments come in. Good morning, Rochelle. Thank you for joining. Dawn has just said, I love what you said about care coming from the source. Yes, absolutely. You have to get to the source of it, of what's going on. Otherwise, the external and outside factors are going to get loud. Okay, so I always say our emotions and what we need is always like a beach ball. This beach ball that we try to shove under the water, and we're just like, get down there, I don't want to deal with you, and then it just comes flying back up. That is exactly it. We have to get to the deep inner rooted issue of what's going on here. And often when we're, filling ourselves with all the problems of everyone else, we forget to look at our own stuff. And next week, Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're actually going to be talking about how to feel it to heal it and the importance of going there. So be sure to stay tuned for that episode as well. But before we get too far off pace, why don't we talk about how active listening will actually help you this holiday season to handle the difficult or challenging friends and family members who tend to dump all of the life problems on you during the holiday season, okay? So when we're having a conversation with someone, especially if it's someone you care about, I want to know, do you try to handle the conversation by wanting to fix everything for them? Is that something that you typically do or have done in the past? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being all of the time and 1 being never, how often would you say that this happens in your personal relationships? Are you always the one trying to do the fixing? Drop it in the comments below and let me know. So I've been in the habit of being the therapist for others. I'm was always continuously wanting to get involved in their dramas and personal situations. And really, by choosing not to go there and by choosing to do active listening instead, I realized like, oh my God, this is really such an incredible tool, because it actually not only allows you to protect yourself, but it also allows them to stand into their own power, okay? So when you use active listening, you begin to let go of the need to control a conversation, okay? You kind of let your ego go, and you're able to let go of feeling trapped by this sort of like pull and tug, people-pleasing behavior, like always wanting to fix and heal everything for others, right? And like I said, that is a very common personality trait of a lot of disconnected eaters, right? So active listening, it actually helps encourage that other person to be doing more of the talking while you're listening, like I mentioned, okay? And what's really great about this is that by you doing more of the listening, you are actually able to get more present within yourself, right? Because you'll be paying attention to what the other person is saying versus trying to think about what you're going to say next and how you're going to problem solve for them, right? So you'll be hearing more clearly what your loved one is actually saying to you and how they're trying to express themselves. So you'll understand them better, right? So when you show up in this way, your conversations with others, they're really going to begin to transform, okay? And like I said, it's because you are empowering that other person to make their own decisions and find their own answers and make their own mistakes, which is really just a growth tool at the end of the day. Like there really are no mistakes. We only just grow and learn and evolve. This life journey is not linear by any means. And it's important, to have these bumps in the road, and you hold space for them to do that, right? So really, you're giving the situations and the problems and the solutions back to the person it belongs to rather than taking it on yourself. So based on what's coming up in the comments, it looks like a few of you, you've been in those situations where chatting with others has been kind of something that's left you feeling emotionally depleted, or you've really wanted to heal and fix all the things for someone. But now, after talking about this, would you say that you see the benefit of you just holding space and listening versus you trying to fix everything? Do you see the benefit in that now that we've been kind of going through this? Let me know, because I want, if you do see the benefit, then I really want to set you up with some really specific techniques and questions that you can use to help you practice active listening like today. And it is a practice. It's going to take time. It might not come easy to you right away, because it's going to be a little bit foreign to you, especially if you're someone who is always trying to give advice. It will be a little bit of a challenge at first, but I think this will really be helpful for you, especially during the holidays in these type of situations, okay? So before I get into some tips and techniques and questions that you can ask in these types of conversations, what do you need to start applying active listening during the holidays? What do you think that you need to start applying active listening? And how do you think that this would improve or change your relationships with people in your life? And also, who do you need to start practicing active listening with? Is there anyone that you can identify? Okay, so Dawn says, because I feel not so pressured to help others. Yeah, and that's the thing too, right? Like, we can only help ourselves. At the end of the day, we can hold space and we can guide. And like, if anyone understands this, it's me, because being a coach, when I first started coaching, I felt so much pressure to fix everything for everyone. But then I realized, like, I can absolutely hold space and I can guide, and I can ask the right questions to help them get to the answer. But if I'm just constantly giving them the answers and solution, those would be my answers and my solutions. But I like to give the power back to that person so that they can find their own solutions that best work for them, right? So like Dawn said, it's really nice to not feel the pressure to always feel like you have to help others, right? So I'm going to share the 3 most important steps that you need to know in order to stand by and support a conversation through active listening, okay? So number one, and you might want to write these down. So rather than thinking about what to say next as the person that you're sitting with shares with you, I want you to instead of focusing on what to say, I want you to focus on the exact words that are being expressed by that person, okay? So take note of, like, what is it that they're feeling? What are they feeling? What are they going through? Really pinpoint those words and listen to those feelings that they're addressing with you, okay? And repeat. And the best thing to make sure that you're fully understanding is to actually repeat back every single thing that they're sharing with you, okay? To make sure that you're understanding. So something you could say here, just to make sure and to confirm that you're hearing correctly, you could say, what I'm hearing is, and then fill in the blanks based on what they're saying. So just to give an example of that, so say you're talking with a friend who's been having a really tough time getting pregnant. Okay, say it's a friend that's been having a hard time getting pregnant. So maybe you could say, what I'm hearing is you're worried about whether or not you and your husband are going to be able to get pregnant. So see how you picked out the worriedness, right? So if she's like, I'm really worried and stressed, and blah, blah, you could say, I hear that you're really worried and stressed about whether or not you and your husband are going to get pregnant, right? So it's really picking out those words, but listening and really hearing what they're saying. And that comes from being present by using active listening, okay? The next important step to use when practicing active listening is empathizing with what is being expressed. So I don't want you just sitting there and just nodding your head and, just listening to everything they're saying. I also want you to be able to empathize with them, because most of the time when people are venting or, they're dumping stuff on you, it's not always that they're actually looking for an answer. Sometimes it's really that they just want to be heard, right? So by empathizing with what is being expressed, you're holding space for them to feel heard, and that's usually what people want. And when I say that, by empathizing with them, I'm not saying that you necessarily have to believe everything that they're saying, or you have to understand it yourself, or even agree with it. You don't have to do any of those things, but just let them know that you can understand why they're feeling that way, right? So empathy, and using empathy would be something like, I can understand that must have felt, and then fill in the blank. So using the same example I use, I can understand that you must have felt extremely hurt and frustrated and disheartened when you found out that you're no longer ovulating, right? If it pertained to pregnancy. So you're saying you understand and you see where they're at, and you're hearing their emotions. Okay? Is this making sense? Any questions about any of that before I move forward? So we have the last and third tip of the steps that you need to take when practicing active listening. And the third step is to validate the other person's experience. So, for example, you could say, you must feel frustrated, deflated by this experience. So you're validating what they're feeling. You're saying, yeah, you must have felt this way. Or of course you felt this way. There's no doubt that you would feel this way, right? So just to recap on the 3, you want to listen to what they're saying versus like constantly trying to solve it, and focus on the exact words that they're expressing. Okay? And then repeating back to them what you're hearing. The second thing is empathize with what is being expressed. Okay? So I can understand that you must have felt, and then going into how they're feeling, and then validating their emotions and what's going on for them in that personal experience. So you must feel, or of course you feel. Okay? So it's really important that you follow those 3 steps, because that's going to ensure that there is still a concrete connection going on in that conversation, where you're not just like, because then they're going to think like, oh my God, they're not even listening to me, right? So that's why it's so important to follow those 3 steps, okay? And it also shows that you're listening and you are interested in what they are saying, okay? And then if you're wanting to know how to like continue the conversation, or you're wanting to know how to have them start to answer and come up with some solutions to their own problems and their own questions, I'm going to give you like 5 or 6 questions you can be asking them during this conversation, okay? So you'll definitely want to write these ones down. So the first one, have you had this problem in the past? Have you had this problem in the past? Okay. The second one is, what worked in the past to solve this? What worked in the past to solve this? Because then you start getting them into that mindset of solving their own problem and being in a solution-based mindset, okay? So what have you done in the past that solved this, okay? And then you could also ask them, what didn't work? What didn't work in the past? So it helps them start narrowing things down. What hasn't worked and what did work, right? The next one would be, what do you think you should do about that? What do you think you should do about that? So again, you're putting the ownership back on them, right? Hearing what they think they should do, because they probably started to already think of solutions, okay? But you're allowing them to show up for those solutions that they've been thinking about, okay? And then the last one is, do you have some ideas of what you think you might do next? Do you have some ideas of what you think you might do next? And then they'll start listing out their ideas. Okay, so that really has you getting this conversation going and moving towards finding a solution that works for them versus you having to find that solution. Okay, so Dawn says, oh, I love these 3 steps. Yeah, like they're really powerful and they really, really, really help you to be present and be aware of the conversation while not allowing the conversation to like be dumped on you, right? So you're kind of like really creating that boundary by keeping those 3 steps in mind, okay? So I hope that's all really clear to you guys. I hope you were able to take something away from these active listening practices and that you can use them as needed throughout the holiday season, okay? I'm so sorry if you hear that background noise. That's my little chihuahua. I think she has kennel cough and she's constantly hacking things up. So she's just sitting here beside me and I'm just caring for her, and I'm sure you can hear her in the video if you're watching the recording, so just know that it's just little Lays. So again, yeah, I hope you can use these questions and these 3 steps that I just shared with you to help you navigate through these challenging conversations during the holidays, okay? And what I really want from you today is I really want you to sort of make that decision before going into the holidays that you will not be this therapist for others any longer, okay? And that you really are ready to empower others to have these experiences and create their own solutions for their own lives, okay? However that might turn out. But I promise you, by you putting the ownership back on them, you're actually being a better friend, a better daughter, a better supporter, because they're going to get to the bottom of this much faster when it's their own solutions. I mean, you could offer some tips and suggestions, but ultimately have them come up with some as well. Okay, and that will really work by asking those explorative questions that I asked. So I'm dying to know, how is this all feeling? I know it's been helpful for Dawn. She's mentioned it's super helpful, but how is this feeling for you? So if you go into the holidays and you do try this technique out, I always think it's really important to write about your experience and maybe put it in a journal, or you can come on into Turn Up the Love Insiders, which is the private Facebook group that I'm the community manager for. You can find that on Facebook by going to facebook.com/groups/Turn Up the Love Insiders. And there, if you would like to share what your experience was with active listening over the holidays, we would love to hear about it because, like I said, this is so incredibly common for disconnected eaters. So everyone in that space is someone who is ready to ditch the diet cycle, reconnect with food, and come home to their bodies. And they've struggled with food at least one time or another. So the conversations will definitely be relatable. That's for sure. Okay, so if that sounds like something that is resonating with you, if that sounds like something you want to try over the holidays, I would love to hear about it. You can always jump back to this conversation too and let me know how it went for you. But I'm curious to see how things go differently after trying the active listening approach. And again, it will take the attention off the food because you won't be absorbing so much of their chaos, their inner chaos, which will lead you to have outer chaos by turning to food to suppress, right? So who here wants to prioritize self-care and having more balanced conversations with others over the holidays to remove the overwhelm? Who here wants to feel that way? Give me a hell yes in the comments if that's how you want to feel. Because I sure as heck know that that's how I want to feel moving into this holiday and every holiday moving forward, because it definitely has not always been that way for me in the past. So if you are wanting to feel more grounded and centered and present during the holiday season, or if you're ready to connect with yourself in a way that feels important to you during this time of year, then I think that grabbing my 10-minute guided holiday meditation would be a really, really, really good fit for you right now. It's super quick. It's for beginners. It's easy. It's not woo-woo fluffy. It's very direct to the point, talking about the holidays and Christmas and having all these expectations over us and how to sort of let that go. So if you have not already grabbed the 10-minute meditation, you can grab that by hitting the link in my bio if you're watching this on Instagram. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can grab it by grabbing or hitting the link that I'm about to post right now. I'll leave it there for you so you can grab it. Just give me 2 seconds. Or you can also head on over to my website at turnupthelove.ca. And there, if you head to any of the blog posts where we've been talking about keeping mindful over the holidays. So last week we talked about judgment. The week before that we talked about prioritizing your self-care. So there you can grab it at the bottom. If you scroll to the bottom or on the side, you'll see a little image of the meditation, and you can grab it there also. Okay, but ultimately, I really wanted to wish you guys a really happy, wholesome holiday season. I hope it is filled with not only health, but also pleasure and joy, downtime, reflection, gratitude. Right? This is what the season is really all about. And I really don't want you to get wrapped up in all of the craziness. You deserve that time to reconnect with yourself and your being on all levels. So enjoy it, make the most of it, but most of all, stay present, because that is where you'll feel grounded and connected to your truest self. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I will be back next week with another live episode at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, every Wednesday moving forward. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your weeks. Get all your holiday stuff done so you can have some downtime, and we will chat super soon. Take care and have a great holiday. Bye for now. Merry Christmas.